Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Let's take a look at the rest of Meghan's interview and hope that the, huge ego calms down just a tad. In the next section of this piece, she is clapping back at everybody who has come out from Montecito to say that they don't particularly like Harry and Meghan's presence in their neighborhood, that they're not very good neighbors, that they're kind of annoying with their giant convoys and overly self-important nonsense, that it doesn't really fit into the Montecito community. Remember, we said in her print interviews, she has a tendency to, sell an image, whatever image it is that she's trying to sell. Currently, her era is, this is Meghan how she's always been. I've always been a crafty homemaker, which is not believable and does not track with reality, but that's the image she's trying to sell. So she's going to push that hard throughout this article. And she did in part 1. If you missed it, I'll link it for you. She's going to try to clap back at any of the recent news stories, articles, opinion pieces that have been out that she disagrees with or thinks weren't correct. She's going to counter those narratives and try to clap back at them in some way, shape, or form. We've already seen a great deal of that. And C, she tends to accidentally reveal her own toxic traits. So, next up, she is clapping back at those rumors and interviews from locals that they didn't like Meghan and Harry's presence. They didn't find them to be a good contribution to the Montecito community. Here she says that the Montecito community has actually gotten to know her from school drop-offs and play dates, which have become essential. We hosted a little camp because winter break was long, she says with a laugh. We had several days with different families at our home and we were able to get to know the parents better and all the kids could play. Meghan and Harry set up obstacle courses and face painting. It's a dream, she says, but I also know that being part of a community means you put effort into it. It would have been nice if she would have put effort into being part of the royal family and the British community. Maybe that would have been a nice thing for her to try to do. Perhaps she's just a late bloomer and she's only just now gained some degree of emotional maturity where she realizes the value in, not being antagonistic. Or maybe it's because this is a situation that benefits her to try to make friends with locals. Because after those articles came out, all of a sudden she's planned a winter camp. In the process, she says Montecito has become protective of the Sussexes, the exact opposite of what the actual locals said in their interviews. Once you know us, I think you want us to have the same normalcy as parents and for our children as they do, despite however unique our situation is. So Meghan's just deciding she can speak for the whole of Montecito and everybody who gets to know them. Like, once you know us, you want us to be protected too. It's so arrogant. It's so strange. For Meghan, normal looks like nights out with Harry and pals. We go to a lot of dinners, and not just in people's homes or private rooms. We just go into the restaurant, she says. I really love that we can just have fun. Once again, clapping back at the revelations that she and Harry make a big deal of going out to eat or going anywhere, that they call ahead, get private tables in private rooms, and make a big fuss about having private entrances and all of this nonsense, and that it's kind of frowned upon among the Montecito community because they're pretty much all really, really wealthy and famous, or at least it's very common to be wealthy and or famous in Montecito, so people just don't behave that way, but Harry and Meghan have been. So perhaps it got to her that the community wasn't big fans. Her friendships with other moms have grown beyond school ties into deeper connections. I have a couple of girlfriends up here. These are stay-at-home moms and working women with normal jobs, not in the public eye. We went from just connecting through our kids to having girls' night or doing Pilates together. One confidant recalls how they first connected with Archie and her daughter became fast friends at school. Meghan reached out with a voicemail inviting her to a play date. You can see that as a unit, the friend says of the family, they're all very connected. When Meghan was invited to her low-key birthday party at home, she showed up despite not knowing anyone else and chatted with the other women about mom stuff in life. It was fun and natural. She was comfortable and just chilling. I'm sure she was. Here's the thing about narcissists. When they are the one and only famous person in the room, or they're the most well-known person, or perhaps they perceive themselves to be the most popular or most successful or above the group in some way, shape, or form, they're actually very pleasant. They're kind, they're gregarious, they're smiling, they're relaxed, text because they feel above the group. Whenever a narcissist feels elevated in some way, they're extraordinarily pleasant. That's why when you're trying to work with them, sometimes they respond very well to compliments and things like that, and will be more cooperative when you do that. So that's no wonder this accidentally revealed a toxic trait. And additionally, why is Meghan enlisting these people to tell these stories to the press? Because she needs to counter the narratives that have been circulating. And so that further shows a toxic trait that Meghan may very well only be making these connections and be pleasant to these people in order to have this result. Granted, it also might just be that she's being nice to these people, or that she's grown, or that she's trying to put her best foot forward or change her ways. Sure, but the pattern that we've seen, it makes much more sense and would be much more reasonable to assume that there are ulterior motives at play. She says that she goes to yoga classes that sometimes have 40 to 50 people in them and just walk in like, hi. Of course, at the beginning, that felt like a lot. By the way, I think anybody walking into a yoga class with 50 people and everyone looks up, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. But now I love it. It's the best. I had missed it. Again, same thing. Somebody who's high in narcissism is going to enjoy that sort of experience. And the only reason to point it out and detail it, that, oh, everybody looked at me when I walked in, is to feed the ego and reveals that narcissism. Meghan discusses her decision to film off-site at not her own home, which I think makes sense because that becomes a working environment. You don't really want that in your own private space. But she does spend a good amount of time trying to paint this picture of the very involved, very normal mom that a lot of people are going to find hard to believe just because of the immense privilege and wealth and amount of staff that Harry and Meghan have around them at all times. It's anything but normal. And the way Meghan is approaching it, where she's just telling us these things, rather than showing us these things and demonstrating it through her values over a period of time, makes it difficult to believe. This next part is kind of cringy. I think Meghan thought this section was going to come off as cute, perhaps sweet or relatable, but it comes off as kind of silly and cringy. She identifies food as one of her love languages. No problem there. Even before I was a mom, I loved being able to nurture in that way. Some of my favorite childhood moments are the meals that my mom would make. She'd made a lot of soul food. I remember she'd taken a Thai cooking class, so every week we had Thai barbecue chicken and spring rolls. I remember those flavors so well, and I want my kids to have those same formative memories of things that I cook. If she would have stopped there, it would have been fine. If she would have just left it at that I have memories of my mom cooking, and I still go back to those flavors, and I want to do that for my kids. Fine, relatable, perfect, stop right there. But Meghan can't, and she goes too far. We call them mama meals. Do you really? Who's walking around their house calling it a mama meal? I hope nobody. And those are the ones that I hope they come back to when they're older, when they're married and they have their own kids and they go, oh, let's have a mama meal. Nobody's going to say that, Meghan. Building a legacy. A bit grand. While she may not have filmed inside her home, she found ways to incorporate home life into the show, filming in their chicken coop, garden, and orchard. Her kids would come with Harry and visit me on set, and I loved that my children were able to watch me working and see the balance of that and understand what Mama does and is working to create and share. It was really special because up until then they hadn't seen me at work. Fair, but once again, this is just going to remind people of the immense privilege that she has versus everybody else, and that this was all just sort of handed to her. A lot of people are more deserving of this sort of a show, have more talent, more charisma, more ability to host a show like this. And for Meghan, it's just something she decided to do. It's sort of unbecoming and feels a little bit ungrateful the way that she talks about it, because she not once recognizes throughout this article the privilege that she has, and that none of this would have been possible without Harry or the royal family's connections that she has been feeding off of. Having a title and all of that she uses all the time. Meghan says having her daughter on the website for As Ever was especially meaningful. Being able to have my own little girl, as I've spent so much of my life championing the rights of girls and women, and to be able to see this as a multi-generational story. Archie is of course included in that. My husband is of course included in that, but I love the heritage feeling of it, and knowing this is something that I can create in front of my daughter and teach her what it's like to be a working mom. This is something that hopefully can be a part of her legacy too, and this is exactly the same issue Meghan She is not the same sort of working mom as everybody else. Meghan has people who clean her house, run her errands, help nanny the kids, take care of all the responsibilities and details that everybody else has to do all by themselves. It is not the same thing. So this was not a wise angle to take from a PR perspective, because it's only going to remind people and point out to people the differences, not the similarities. I think all parents in this phase with kids the same age know it's rinse and repeat. If there's time, Harry and Meghan catch up on TV together. Reflecting on the past 5 years since their move, Meghan acknowledges how much is different. 5 years ago, Archie was only 8 or 9 months old, so my life has changed so much. Anyone who has children will tell you it's a huge evolution as a woman during that time. And then they ask her what might be coming in the next 10 years, and she doesn't really answer. She just says, well, Archie will be driving by then. Lacking a long game, perhaps? Let's take a look at these comments. Aquanetta says, whatever happened to wanting privacy? This person likes Harry and Meghan. I love them. They bring nothing but good to a world of hate. People want to just put them down because it makes them feel better. So sad. These people are raising wonderful children with morals, integrity, honesty, values, principles, and showing them how wonderful it is to work hard. Oh, how I wish all people like them. Okay. Ridiculous. Meghan and Harry introduced themselves to the public as independent people rather than part of the royal family negatively, complaining and lying and exaggerating and mischaracterizing situations, and made a big, huge stink that basically slandered people who hadn't done anything wrong, it turns out. Then Meghan and Harry went back on this and said, no, there were no isms and ists going on with the family. It was all just the press, which still is not true. And now they just want to move on. And that's just not how it works this day and age. Really, it should never work that way. And I'm not sure that it ever has worked that way. Typically, public figures who make mistakes need to apologize before they can move forward. And Meghan and Harry have neglected to do that. That is why people don't like them, on top of the general unlikability factors of them in general. Meghan and Harry are quite negative. I know this show is coming across as positive, this interview came across as positive, but that is just because that's the image Meghan is trying to sell. Her PR people, her comms people, somebody got to her and said, hey girl, you need to stop complaining and being so negative all the time. You need to shift to a more positive narrative. Move on. She's trying. The problem is that the public won't accept it without that apology bit included. Also, Harry and Meghan are not teaching anybody how it is to work hard. Like I've said a million times covering this article, she and Harry have so much help, so much assistance, so much privilege. None of it is working hard. All of it is just handed to them. Here she goes again. She made the same mistake with her podcast, turned every discussion about herself, and we gave a collective eye roll. Exactly. Throughout this, there were so many unnecessary, this is how it is for me. Everybody likes watching me do this. Everybody's so happy to see me do this. Look at how I'm doing this, and everybody's getting happy because I'm doing this. That's what this article was, and it was terrible. And also, clapping back at the neighborhood not liking her, clapping back about the name of the show, pushing responsibility off on that, and selling this image of, oh no, this is Meghan as ever. Not a new era, but rather a return to an old one, which is just not true. This is a new era for Meghan. You can tell by the way she's pushing it on people and trying to introduce herself this way. She's rebranding herself along with this show and the business, and it's just not going to work. It's been too many rebrands. It's stale. It's old. This person likes Harry and Meghan, but still is criticizing Meghan's approach here. The first part of their comment is ridiculous, but then they say, I feel like Meghan would do well to take a cue from Jennifer Garner, who has a very down-to-earth, oh, you're just watching me at home, instead of this highly curated Martha Stewart vibe. Martha was a professional event planner. Meghan might be better to come off more off the cuff. I agree, but I think she, A, wouldn't be able to do that because she's such a control freak. That would be too hard. And B, she just doesn't have the charisma for it the way Jennifer does. Jen Garner has great charisma in that dynamic. She doesn't take herself too seriously. Meghan takes herself incredibly seriously and needs everything to be just so, and doesn't have a good sense of humor and charisma to be able to do things in that way, sort of impromptu. She just doesn't have it. Worst example of a love story as ever, with all due respect. I agree. They didn't tell us how they're back in a honeymoon phase, by the way, but that was thrown in there in the intro to sort of clap back at the divorce rumors that have been swirling about. But Meghan never really said anything about that. So that's a bit odd. I just noticed that they never mentioned that in the actual interview. Meghan said nothing about being back in a honeymoon phase with Harry, but then it's on the cover right here, back in a honeymoon phase with Harry. So it's all just too over the top and ridiculous. And again, those love story quotes and saying that all the time and using that is just so off-putting to people. What did you guys think of this interview? Be sure you didn't miss part 1. I will link it for you up here. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye!